The government has today unveiled the Vice-Chancellor of Sydney University, Mark Scott, as the leader of a review into the development of our nation's teachers. He'll lead a panel of education experts tasked with analysing the way teachers are trained through universities. It will provide a series of recommendations on how to strengthen the performance of teachers to bring about better results for students. This panel was set up by the Education Minister Jason Clare, who joins me live now. Minister, thanks so much for your time. This review by Mark Scott and his fellow experts looks like it's got a few different elements to it. One, the quality, but then there's the supply of teachers as well. There's a huge shortfall right now.
Yeah, we've got a shortage of teachers right across the country. There's a couple of reasons for that. We've seen a drop in the number of people enrolling at university to become teachers. I think it's dropped by about 16% in the last 10 years. And then we don't have enough students at university actually completing their university degree and going on to become teachers. And then thirdly, you've got a lot of experienced teachers who are feeling worn out and burnt out and are leaving the profession early. So this review is focused on the second of those challenges, helping to make sure that you get more students at university complete their teaching degrees.
Right.
So to put it in perspective, about 70% of uni students finish their degrees, but only 50% of teaching students finish their teaching degrees. Some universities do it better than others. Some universities have got it as high as 70%, others as low as 30%. I want this panel to look at what some universities are doing right and others are doing wrong, and whether we can
but where students go into schools after 2 years, and so they do a prac, for example, after 2-3 years, and so I don't want to do that.
That's a big part of it. I was back at my old high school earlier this week, and the principal told me of her experience where she'd have students come into the classroom after 3 years at university and suddenly say, hang on a second, I don't want to do this. It takes a special type of person to want to be a school teacher. This is no easy job. It's a really difficult one. And so a big part of what Mark wants to look at, and what I want Mark and the team to look at, is how we make prac better. Medical schools at universities do a good job of that with internships linked up with hospitals for doctors. We don't do as good a job with teachers and schools.
Do you think it needs to start sooner?
Yes.
In a degree?
Yeah, I do. I think when we had a roundtable with teachers and principals a couple of weeks ago, the one thing they said is you need prac in year one, and it needs to be more than just 30 students at the back of the classroom watching. So an opportunity for longer periods of time in front of students, and I guess a little bit more rigour, a little bit more methodology around the practical experience that teaching students get before they become teachers and enter the classroom for real.
Will this also aim to improve the quality of the teachers graduating?
One of the things that came out of the roundtable was a comment by Derek Scott, the head of ACARA, who said that only 12.5% of the time at university is spent teaching students how to teach kids to read. There's nothing much more important than learning to read. You need to learn to read to be able to learn other things. And so it strikes me that this is another thing we need to look at here, the amount of time that students get on the very practical elements of what it takes to be a great teacher, teaching kids to read, teaching maths, as well as managing classroom behaviour, and having the skills you need for a whole bunch of different kids that have got different needs in our classroom.
Yeah, that seems like the crucial foundation you're talking about there. Let's look at something else that you announced this week with the Treasurer, the ACCC review into childcare. What's the review going to tell you that we don't already know?
So next week we'll introduce the legislation to implement the promise we made at the election to cut the cost of childcare. That's really important. That'll cut the cost of childcare for more than 1 million Australian families. The first interview I did as Minister was with you, Kieran, and we talked about this, how expensive it is. Childcare's gone up by 41% just in the last 8 years. And so the legislation that we'll introduce next week is about cutting that cost for the average family on the average income of about 120 grand a year. That'll cut their cost by about $1,700.
So why do you need another review then?
Well, we need all the tools in our toolbox here. We also promised, along with this legislation, to get the consumer and competition watchdog onto the case to look at why have prices jumped by so much in such a short period of time, and what are the sort of price mechanisms that we could put in place to put downward pressure on prices.
We've seen others in the government, if we move on now to this Hawthorn story, the football club, some really disturbing allegations out of that external review. You must be pretty shocked by the claims as well.
Oh, my heart sank when I saw that, as I'm sure everyone's did. There's no place for racism in sport, no place for racism anywhere. But I was glad to see the response from the AFL yesterday, and in particular saw my friend Tanya Hosh, who is leading the process of putting together the panel to conduct this investigation. If there's anybody that I trust to be able to get to the bottom of that, it's someone of Tanya's calibre.